And welcome to the Pernick Cyber Podcast, where we discuss trending topics in cybersecurity. I am your host, Felix Jimenez, and I appreciate you stopping by for today's episode. Today's topic is going to be why we now need to update our Google Chrome browser. They've had a rough year, and we are going to talk about that in a minute. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about some of the verbiage, right? The goal of the Pernick Cyber podcast is to be able to arm you with information. And this is used in the common vernacular in this particular podcast and in cybersecurity as a whole. So when you hear me use this term, you'll understand why. It is a CVE, or a Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure. And I wanted you to understand what that was, right? Because the shortened version is a CVE, right? But when you hear me say that there is a CVE attached to an issue, it's pretty serious. So the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures is a list of publicly disclosed computer security flaws. So this comes from the manufacturer, whether it's, someone who has an application, right? Something that was discovered in the source code. The Windows system, Microsoft had discovered, some sort of vulnerability on their systems, Mac OS, Linux, and hardware vendors, right? Whenever they discover something. So I'll give you an example. If Cisco discovers a vulnerability with one of their firewalls, right? And it relates to the VPN. They'll put out a CVE, right? A Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, because they've been able to identify that, or it's been exploited in the wild and they need to put a fix on it. So these vendors actually publish these CVE IDs once either they discover it or someone notifies them that they've discovered a vulnerability within their product. So now on to Google. When I say that Google has had a difficult year, as it relates to the Google Chrome browser, right, that is, they have had 8 CVEs for 0-day vulnerabilities. So in other words, these are vulnerabilities that were not identified in the wild, right? This is something that they were being actively exploited. And then after, right, those 0-day vulnerabilities are really bad, right? Because there's no signatures. There is no way to identify them. And Google has been hit with 8 of those this year alone, right? And we're only just, a little bit past the halfway point for the year. What I am asking you to do is, whatever you're doing, take a couple of minutes, update your Google Chrome browser. So I don't want to get into the technical terms, right? Because the whole goal is not for me to get into the super technical. What I want for you guys to understand is that this is a very serious vulnerability that was disclosed. And you guys, I'm asking you, right, to protect yourselves by updating your browser. I want to make sure that, with Pernick Cyber, the goal of this podcast is to give you guys information that you otherwise wouldn't have available to you. And this is one of those, right? This is something that was published in one of the cybersecurity CDNs. And it's pretty serious. I'd like for you guys to make sure that you just take a couple of minutes and update your browser. And I'm going to be publishing these a little bit more, right? A little more often, right, when they come, because these are the ones that really affect us in our day-to-day. And I want to help you guys, right? That's the goal of the Pernick Cyber Podcast. That is today's episode. What I would like for you to do is let's start a conversation on Twitter. And if you're watching this on YouTube, let's have a conversation in the comments. I look forward to engaging with the audience. And if you have any questions, by all means, please put them in the comments section, and I'll be happy to engage and have a conversation. Until next time, be vigilant.